All right, chapter 9.5 is about completing the square. The last couple of chapters, it shouldn't be chapters, it should be sections, have been process oriented. Actually, I guess it is chapters. This means we've been asked to learn to complete a series of steps to produce a solution or result. This section does not change. Today we're going to look at the process of something called completing the square. Completing the square itself, before we get to the essential question, is not something that is major immediately, but it is eventually important to you, so you want to make sure you learn it. Because it does have a lot of good uses, and if you don't know how to do it, then again it's going to kind of burn you later on, maybe not so much now, but just make sure you practice it. I don't think it's that hard to do. What does it mean if I complete the square? Well, the process of completing the square creates a trinomial that would factor into a perfect square factor. So it creates a number here, a combination of numbers that would turn into something squared. So whatever you would get, if you were to do the distributive property, it would end up just like this. So again, it's not a difficult process, but the series of steps must be practiced so you are fluent enough to perform it well, and that's the key idea. So before we get to any kind of practice, go ahead and jot down the key steps to it, which is number 1, isolate the x's. Number 2, create the blanks. Yes, there's 2 blanks you'll create. 3, complete the square, which is what we're going to talk about in just a second. 4, simplify both sides and then solve. That's pretty much it. Again, the key thing here is the completing the square process, which is where it just takes practice. But once you get that part, I think it's pretty easy to do. It's just going to be a few mistakes that you'll make in the process. So before we get on to the examples, let's work on the completing of the square, which is finding the value of c that makes it perfect. And here's what you do. First thing you do is you take this number and you cut it in half. Then you take this number and you square it. So c would equal 16. That's it. So again, the first thing you do is you take the middle value b and cut it in half, and then you square it to make 16. So same thing here. First thing you do here is cut this number in half, which would be -2. Second thing you do is square it, which makes +4. So c would equal 4. That's all. All right. -16. So again, you'll take this and cut it in half to be -8, and then square it to make 64. Remember, it's always positive because a square or a negative times a negative is a positive. The last thing you would do, again, if you happen to see a fraction, is not so bad, because all we've been doing honestly is putting this over 2. So double the bottom. This was 8/1 turned into 8/2, which is 4. This was 4/1 turned into 4/2, which is 2. This was 16/1 as a number turned into 16/2, which is 8. So 3/5 just means double the bottom in all honesty, which means it becomes 3/10. I'll prove that to you in just a second. And then when you square a fraction, you square both parts. So square the 3, square the 10. 9/100 would be your value of c. But just to prove it to you, I typed it in here. 3/5 divided by 2 just turns into 3/10. Any fraction you do, if I did 2/7, if I cut it in half, it just means double the bottom number, so it should be 2/14, which actually, let's not do that. Let's do 1/7 divided by 2, which again means double the bottom, which should be 1/14. The reason I didn't do it is because 2/14 would have reduced, which would have kind of went against what I was trying to show you. So that is the completing the square process. Now we just want to learn how to do the whole thing. So in order to do the whole thing, when you complete the square, what we are going to do first off, as it says, is isolate the x's. So you'll literally take the x squared plus 6x and isolate it. Now you'll eventually skip this step, but in general that's what you're doing. Then what you're going to do is add the blank. So you'll do x squared plus 6x plus blank, and then leave your -8. But here's the thing. You're going to do everything on one side of the equal sign, which means that if you are adding a plus or adding a number, pretty much the number you're creating is coming out of nowhere. So we are adding a number here, which means we need to offset it by subtracting that same number. Again, think about a scale, which is balanced. And if I decide to add 5, one way to balance it is to add 5 to the other side. That is balanced. But we're not adding to the other side, so what we could do instead is, to keep it balanced, if we add 5, we could offset by putting a -5 also, because both of these things end up canceling out. So whatever number I put here, whatever number I add here, I'm going to subtract here, which then keeps everything balanced. So far we have x squared, which is right, 6x, which is right, -8, which is also right. So what we're going to do now is complete the square and put it in the right form. So take your x, copy the sign. Always copy the sign because it'll always be the same. 6 cut in half is 3. And then 3 squared is 9, which means 9 is what goes here. So again, I added a 9 to this problem here, so I'm going to offset by subtracting 9. Now I simplify. Negative 8 minus 9 is negative 17. And there you go. That is the process. So again, you have to practice that. There's really no other way to get it but just to kind of go through it. And I do have it set up to where you have to show all these steps on the computer. Maybe not this step, but it's going to pretty much have you type in that step there because that's the part you have to go through. Just remember, once you make the blanks, the key is half square copy. Like it literally just goes down, comes up, and then jumps out to the other number. This should be equal 0. And we're not going to solve by completing the square because, again, it's really not a solving practice to me. It's got a process, but I'm not going to show you how to solve by completing the square because I'm not worried about it. Just complete the square. So here, again, first thing we want to do is isolate the x's. So what you would do is, knowing that we're going to have to add the blanks anyway, is I would isolate and add the blanks at the same time. Just remember, if I added a blank, I want to offset it by subtracting a blank. And now I go through the process. So x minus half of 14 is 7. Remember, cut it in half and then square it, which is 49. And then put a 49 over there. In the end, positive 41 minus 49 is negative 8. And all that equals 0. And just to prove it to you, I'm going to go ahead and work this one out. X minus 7 squared means x minus 7 times x minus 7. Remember doing that? Which means we have x squared minus 7x minus 7x plus 49 minus 8 equals 0. Which means we end up with x squared minus 14x plus 41 equals 0. Now look back at the beginning and it's the same exact thing. So even though this looks different, when you simplify it out, it is still there. The key thing is that we have a perfect square somewhere in that problem that we just created. So again, practice this. Email with questions. Show me your work when you ask me for whatever issues you have so I can look at your work and try to give you a guide as to what you might be doing wrong. But I don't think it's that bad. Again, just get your practice and get this out of the way as fast as possible because the quadratic formula is last and you want to make sure you're ready for that, especially with your test opening up early on Thursday so you can be ready for that. But no rush because remember, it does stay open till Tuesday. But if you can get ahead, that would help you out a lot. So I'm not suggesting that you take it early unless you are ready, but I'm trying to make sure you are ready by giving you a warning on how to do this. I would make the most out of this quickly and then move on to quadratic formula and take a couple of days on that. But outside of that, good luck, and I'll talk to you later.